If you're taking the LSAT and you've only got about 2 months to raise your score, I want you to hear this first. Relax. You're not behind, you're not doomed, and you are absolutely not out of time. Today, I'm going to walk you through a clear, realistic, step by step plan to add 10 points to your LSAT score in the next 2 months, sometimes even more than 10 points, without burning out and without pretending this test is something it's not. I want to share with you a plan that actually works. And I know it works because I've seen it happen thousands of times. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz, and I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I personally raised my own score from a 152 to a 175, and I've helped thousands of students make big jumps, often on tight timelines and often while working full time or juggling school and family. So I want to slow this down and do this the right way. 2 months might sound like not a whole lot of time until you understand what actually moves LSAT scores. You don't need endless time or to see everything or to learn every single type of question that could conceivably show up. But you've got to have focus, precision, and in-depth feedback. 2 months is enough time to fix accuracy problems in logical reasoning or dramatically improve how you read reading comprehension passages. You can also build real timing and endurance and eliminate repeat mistakes that have been costing you points for months or even years. But it's also short enough that you're not going to lose urgency or drift into passive studying. Think of this like a focused sprint, not a marathon. Now, I've seen students move from the low 150s into the 160s and from the 160s into the 170s during a 2-month window because they stopped doing LSAT activities and they started doing LSAT work. Now, if you're retaking the LSAT, you've got to leave the past in the past. Chances are that maybe you're carrying baggage from the past. Maybe you froze on test day. Maybe your practice test scores didn't translate into real world test day conditions. And maybe you thought you were ready until you weren't. Now, here's the hard truth. None of that matters anymore. You cannot prepare to move forward while mentally relitigating the past. The next 2 months is a clean slate. What does matter is that you have clarity on why you want to go to law school, why now, and what LSAT score is actually going to change your outcomes, and what went wrong last time that you are not going to repeat this time around. And you want to be specific about it. Write down your goal score, put it somewhere you're going to see it daily as direction, as motivation. Your mindset is not motivation, though. It's permission to take this seriously without panicking. Now, the second step is to conduct a performance autopsy. And this is where students lose the most time and the most points. If you've taken practice tests or a real LSAT before, you don't want to look at your overall score because that tells you nothing. You've got to do a performance autopsy, question by question, section by section. You want to ask, where are the points leaking? Is there a particular type of logical reasoning question? Are there certain reading comp passage styles? Is it your end of section timing? Is it end of test fatigue? The patterns here matter more than individual misses. So start a simple wrong answer log. What was the question type? Why did you pick the wrong answer? And what would you do differently next time around? If you don't do this, you're going to keep studying hard and improving slowly. But if you do it, your improvement is going to accelerate. Now, the step 3 is to use the right materials in the right format, and this is non-negotiable. The LSAT is online, so your prep also has to be online. That means using real, actual official LSAT questions in the real LSAT online interface under real timing conditions. If you take practice tests on paper, that could potentially create fake confidence. Now, if you want your score to improve in the next 2 months, your practice tests have got to match test day as closely as possible. And that alone could fix a surprising number of mysterious test day score drops. Now, the fourth step is to build a smart 2-month study plan, a deliberate plan laying out exactly what to do. In your first 2 weeks, focus on accuracy. Maybe that's untimed logical reasoning drills or slow, deliberate reading comp work. At this phase, you want to focus on understanding, not speed, so you can fix your misunderstandings at the root. Then in weeks 3 to 4, you add timing, individual timed sections. You also start tracking your pacing. And you continue targeted drills on your weak areas. Maybe add in some light endurance work. Then in weeks 5 to 6, you're doing full-length practice tests. At least one exam per week, deep, in-depth review afterwards. You identify patterns in your mistakes, and then you adjust your pacing strategies. In weeks 7 and 8, you focus on test day prep, simulating full exams, fine-tuning your timing, eliminating any recurring mistakes, and you lock in your routine, your sleep, and your mindset. Now notice what is missing here. We're not talking about studying randomly. We're not overdoing full tests too early, and we're not chasing volume for the sake of volume. Which brings us to step 5, mastering the review process. This is where you get the points. That's where your scores are made. Checking the answer key is not review. Reading explanations is also not review. Real review means asking, where did my reasoning break? Did I misread the stimulus? Did I misunderstand the question? Did I fall for attempting wrong answer? You've got to understand why each wrong answer is wrong, why the right answer is provably, demonstrably right. If you can explain it out loud, if you can explain it to somebody else clearly, you own it. But if you can't explain it, then you don't own it. And that's how you stop making the same mistakes under pressure. Now, we've also got to train timing and endurance intentionally. The LSAT, contrary to popular belief, is not a test of logic. It's a test of decision-making under time pressure. That means practicing 35-minute sections, learning when to skip and when to come back, and recognizing when to cut losses. Now, you want to track your timing here. You want to notice if it takes you a while to get warm up. You want to notice if you get fatigued towards the end. Endurance is trainable like anything else, but you're not going to build it by accident. Now, in the final stretch, the final week or two before the exam, your job is not to learn new tricks. Your job is consistency. You've got to know the format of the LSAT, the rules of the LSAT, and your personal test day routine. So practice under realistic conditions, dress the same way, eat the same way, warm up the same way. That's going to build your confidence, having a familiar process. Now, a 10-point increase in 2 months is not magic. It's the result of focused accuracy work, honest self-analysis, smart scheduling, real review, and consistent timed practice. The good news here is that law schools only care about your highest score. So this is your opportunity to rewrite your story, not by grinding harder, but by studying smarter. So trust the process, control what you can, and take this test seriously without letting it control you. That's how scores move. Now, if you'd like my help getting that score up, getting those 10 points for the test in 2 months from now for the April LSAT, or in 4 months for the June LSAT, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer for everybody watching this now or later. Happy to meet with you personally, talk you through your plan of attack, help you build your LSAT study plan for whenever you're taking the LSAT, April, June, August, or beyond. If you haven't already, feel free to book the lesson with me. Happy to help you figure out how to get your score up to the highest possible extent and reach your max potential. Now, I see a lot of questions coming into the chat here. I'll get to as many of those as I can over the course of this live. So feel free to drop them in here. Happy to help you craft your plan. Just pulling up that link for everybody who's asking for it. It's unpluggedprep.com/start. Let's see if this one goes through. All right, cool. So it's up there. I see questions here. Someone wants to take the LSAT online. Sydney asks, I have bad test anxiety. Would you recommend taking the test online? Well, actually, almost everybody takes the test online. You're either taking it remotely on your own device or in person on a computer at a Prometric testing center. But when it comes to anxiety, I mean, what do you feel you would do better under? Taking it at home in the comfort of your own environment, or where you have a remote proctor though, or in person at a testing center where there are other people around, but you have the comfort of not dealing with a remote proctor. And as somebody mentioned, you can get accommodations to take the LSAT on paper. That is one potential option that you could explore. So think about whether you might like that even better. It's ultimately your call. You have the freedom to pursue that. Of course, there is an accommodations process that you have to undergo, but it might not be a bad idea if you think that's the optimal for you. As Phaedra says, you do need accommodations for paper, but if you get a note from a qualified professional, a primary care physician, a psychiatrist, you'll probably get the paper accommodations. Heba asks, I'm applying to law schools this week, but my application will probably be on hold. So would this impact my application? Well, if your application's on hold, yeah, it's going to impact your application kind of by definition, right? I guess you're wondering, will it impact your chances to have it on hold? Well, it will delay when you apply, and all else being equal, better to apply to law school earlier than later. And so I guess my question is, why is your application going to be on hold? Is there a way that you can remove it from being on hold so that you can remove any delays? Any context you could share, I could better advise you based on that. We want to do whatever we can to get your application unstuck, get it out of being on hold so that you can just move forward and apply. The earlier you can apply, the better, all else being equal. We certainly don't want any holds if we can avoid them. Nicholas is asking, what is the typical increase in points students who take their diagnostic test without any prior knowledge see after they study for 100 hours, or is that too general of a question? I mean, it's not too general. I'm not sure there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, but I'm not sure that it's a useful question to ask. I mean, how does knowing that help you? I'm just being blunt here, honestly. I mean, what's a better question you could ask that will do more for you to boost your odds of getting the highest possible score, right? I mean, students in our programs typically see an improvement of 5 to 10 points in the first month on average, 10 to 15 points in 2 to 3 months. Of course, that's not a promise or a guarantee. Your results may vary. Ultimately, your improvement is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. If you wanted a larger increase over a shorter time frame, we have more intensive boot camp style programs where we take our standard 3 to 4 month curriculum or 5 to 6 month curriculum, even we compress and accelerate into only, say, 2 months for those taking the LSAT in April who want to maximize their score in a relatively shorter period of time. But to be frank, 100 hours is actually not that much studying, which is part of my initial hesitation in even answering the question. 100 hours is 25 hours per week over the course of 4 weeks, which is fairly standard, actually. Not nearly enough time to reach your fullest potential, of course. More like 500 hours of studying is more in line with what the typical student would put in to achieve a 170 plus LSAT score, because you've got to learn all the different sections, all the different question types. There's roughly 17 different types of logical reasoning questions. There's also reading comp as well. Then there's pacing and time management, doing individual sections and full-length exams to build up your endurance. And you got to do all of that to reach a top score. And you can compress it into 2 months or 10 weeks for those taking it in April. You can spread it out over a longer period of time for those taking it in June or August or beyond. I see someone's asking about the October LSAT. So yes, there is an LSAT going to be in October, most likely. LSAC has not released the test dates yet for beyond June, but we can expect that they will offer it in August, September, October, and November, as they did last year. It'll probably be the same again. Once they do release those dates, of course, I'll update everybody here to let you know. I see Braden's asking, what should I do if I begin moving to timed sections, but my accuracy then begins to fall? And that's pretty normal, right? I mean, if you're doing questions untimed, your accuracy is going to be higher. If you start timing yourself, your accuracy is going to drop because there's accuracy, then there's timing, and there's endurance. And at each stage, you've got to adjust to the new realities and the new difficulties of the official LSAT administration that you're going to take. So if your accuracy falls when you work on pacing, don't worry. Just don't sweat it, but figure out how can you improve your pacing. In logical reasoning, for example, you've got roughly You've got 35 minutes to solve roughly 26 questions. And so you have about a minute and 24 seconds per question. And of course, some of those are going to be harder or easier than others. There's a general increase in difficulty as time goes on. And so you want to do the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes, build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section that truly need it. So do several timed sections, as many as you can in a reasonably short period of time to get over the pacing hump and develop your own internal sense of rhythm. But the fact that your accuracy drops is not a reason for you to stop doing timed sections. It's just part of adjusting to the real world constraints of the exam. Then when you start transitioning to full exams and you're doing 4 timed sections back to back, you may find your accuracy drops once again because fatigue is a factor. So then you got to build up your endurance, build up your stamina. That's another way to level up your prep. And so in our coaching programs, we build for you a personal study plan laying out exactly what to do, transitioning you from accuracy to pacing to endurance. So if you're taking the LSAT in April, for example, in 2 months from now, in roughly 10 weeks, you've got 3 weeks for accuracy, 3 weeks for pacing, 4 months for endurance. That's one way you might break it down. Of course, you're ideally not spending only 10 weeks in your prep, but if that's the reality of the schedule that you have available to you, because you're running against the calendar, you're racing against the clock for April, that's what you got to do. And so we need to carve out time for each phase of your prep to build your accuracy, then build your pacing, then build your endurance. And so if you're looking for support, developing your personal study plan to get you from your current score to your goal score in your time frame before your official LSAT, you could book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. We'll talk through what your personal plan of attack could look like to get you to your goals on your time frame. And by the way, for folks who are just joining, I run these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you might be watching this. If you find it helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. And so I do appreciate your support in spreading the word. I see Phaedra's asking, do you recommend learning everything, then working on pacing, or should you do it simultaneously? That's a great question. So partially depends on your time frame. In other words, how long do you have between now and your official LSAT? If you have only 10 weeks, you can't do only foundational work and save only all the timing work for later, because you need a longer period of time to expose yourself to the pacing difficulties and the endurance difficulties of the real thing. So while I'd recommend a primary focus on accuracy in the earlier stages, you also want to introduce some timed work as well, relatively early, to build up that skill set as well. If you've got 6, 8, 10 months, then you could slow it down and do only accuracy work for a while before introducing pacing. I see Fox and Seals asking, is it a good strategy to start at the end of the section and work backwards? I've heard that before. I don't love that, because the logical reasoning questions are in a general order of difficulty, meaning they get harder as the section goes on. And so I typically recommend locking in your low-hanging fruit first, securing the easy points, building your momentum, building your morale, building your confidence, saving the tougher ones for later, because everything's worth the same. So my question is, why would you start with the hardest questions, risk getting bogged down, and never even get to the easy ones, given that every single question is worth 1 raw score point? So my thought is, lock up the easy points first, secure them, get those in the bag, then move on to the tougher ones. And if you see a really tough question, just flag it, skip it, come back to it later. But don't kill your momentum by doing hard ones first. That's my personal take. Of course, you can experiment and see what works best for you there, but that's my take. I see Marie's asking, how long has LSAT Unplugged been active as a resource for students? So I've been personally teaching the LSAT since 2005, so a little over 20 years now. I can't believe it. I started my first LSAT website in 2008. That was a free blog website sharing articles, because that was before social media was really much of a thing. In 2018, I started really focusing on my LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. And so if you're talking about free video resources, I'd say 2018 is really the time that I really started focusing on sharing free videos on everything LSAT law school admissions. Before that, I had some explanation videos on YouTube, but those were more Khan Academy whiteboard style videos. The real focus on the YouTube channel was more in 2018. So that's how long I'd say we've been around as a real high quality, comprehensive free resource on everything LSAT and admissions. So I've been going pretty hard on the YouTube channel for about 7.5 years now. So if you click the link in my bio over to the YouTube channel, you'll see plenty of videos covering every section, every question type. And of course, in 2018, we also started offering online courses as well as a major focus with live classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and of course, we have the one-on-one coaching as well. And so if you want to talk through what a comprehensive personalized coaching program could look like for you, you can book the free LSAT tutoring lesson with me through the link in my bio. Happy to meet with you personally, talk through a plan of attack. I see Tudi's asking, what do you recommend for an ADH students for LSAT prep? Well, I think that it's even more important for somebody with ADHD to have a more personalized support system because it's going to help with motivation, accountability, focus, structure, rather than a one-size-fits-all course that you might fall behind or get stuck on. One other thing you might want to look into is accommodations. If you have ADHD or test anxiety, you can get accommodations for extra time, extra breaks. Rather than the standard 35-minute sections, you can get 53 minutes, meaning time and a half. You could get 70 minutes with double time or even more. Potentially take the LSAT over the course of 2 days, get unlimited stop-start breaks. We have a lot of experience helping students with ADHD, and so if you want to talk through what your plan could look like, you can also book the free tutoring with me. I see Brantley says, I'm out of college and saving for school. How far out should I begin studying and take the LSAT before applying? Most students typically spend 2 to 3 months studying for the LSAT. It typically takes 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential, though. And so if you're starting your LSAT prep now, you could potentially take the LSAT in August and then apply the second the applications open in September. And you could take the September LSAT as a backup test date as well. Your scores are also good for 5 years, so there's no real rush, and you could take it whenever you feel ready and you're feeling like your practice test scores are at or above your goal score. Take into account that students typically drop 5 to 8 points from their practice test to the official LSAT, and so you want to have that buffer. If you're aiming for a 170 on your official LSAT, you might want to aim for 175 plus on your practice test just so that you got that buffer in case you have a bad proctor, in case you have a tech issue, nerves, or anxiety. So just keep that in mind as when you're setting your goals and deciding whether to actually go forward with it. But ultimately, the answer is take the LSAT whenever you're ready, whenever you're feeling like you're likely to hit or beat your goal score. And I see Ray's asking relatedly that she wants to start law school in fall 2027. When should you take the LSAT? I'd say for anybody watching this who wants to start law school in fall 2027, which I think a lot of you do, coming up, we've got the February LSAT in only a couple days. Not a whole lot of time to study, of course. I'm not going to recommend that test date unless you're already feeling pretty confident about your current scores relative to your goals. For most folks, you're going to want to take it either in April in 2 months, in June in 4 months, in August in 6 months, or beyond. I like April as a first attempt and June as a backup attempt because that way you have the summer just to focus on application essays. You can hit submit the second they open in the fall. If you're aiming for June as your first take and August as your second take, also not a bad idea. You can still apply the second applications open. And they offer the LSAT 8 times a year, and so there's always another chance, another LSAT around the corner. And law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score on your record. And so there's really no downside to retaking. If you think you could do better, if you think you could get a higher score, it's well worth retaking. No downside. If you do better, great. If not, no big deal. Now, if you're taking the LSAT this spring or early summer, I want you to know that you're not behind, you're not late, and the clock is not working against you. There's a lot of LSAT timing myths that get repeated every single year, and they push people into making rushed, expensive, and completely unnecessary decisions. And so I want to slow this down and show you why you're actually in a much stronger position than you think. People will say, if you don't apply early, you're ruined. But the good news is that law schools do not care when you took the LSAT. They only care about what score you earned. Application offices are graded based on medians. The rankings depend on the medians, and scholarship budgets depend on medians. And so a higher LSAT score helps law schools, a lower one doesn't. And so if your choice is apply earlier with a weaker score or apply later with a stronger score, the second option almost always wins. A few more points can be the difference between getting waitlisted and getting accepted, or paying sticker and getting real scholarship money, and that trade-off is worth it. Now, if you're taking the LSAT in April or June, that's really good news for you, because if you take the LSAT in April, you get to see exactly where you stand under real test conditions. You're not guessing that you think you're around a 165, you have concrete data, and from there you have options. You can retake in June if you need to. You can retake again later if you need to. And you can apply right when applications open with your best possible score. And that changes the entire experience of taking the LSAT and applying to law school, because instead of everything riding on one test date, the LSAT becomes a controlled process. And that is going to reduce your anxiety and lead to better performance. And June works the same way. You still have room to adjust, refine, and improve without rushing your applications or locking yourself into a score that you know is not your best. Now, the current LSAT actually works in your favor because it's simpler than it's ever been. There's no more logic games, and they replace those with a second scored logical reasoning section. And that means there is less material for you to study than at any point in modern LSAT history. Logical reasoning makes up 2/3 of your total score. So every improvement you make there counts twice. And that is a huge advantage if you focus correctly. Fewer skills to juggle and more repetition of the same core ideas. And so when people say that the LSAT feels unpredictable, what they usually mean is they haven't stayed with the same core skills long enough to see the repetition. And once you do, the randomness disappears. Now, officially, people will tell you there are 17 different types of logical reasoning questions, depending on how you count them. But not all question types matter equally. The three most important are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And if you master those three, you build a foundation that supports almost everything else. Necessary assumption is the backbone of arguments. They teach you how arguments actually work, and they force you to answer one critical question. What needs to be the case in order for this argument to succeed? And that single skill carries over everywhere. Once you understand the assumption, you know how to strengthen the argument, you know how to weaken it, and you know exactly where it's vulnerable. And strengthen questions, weaken, and flaw, they all rely on this same insight. That's why necessary assumption is such a high yield area, especially if you're short on time. Now, inference questions reward precision. They're not about what sounds reasonable, they're about what the facts force to be true. Now, the most common mistake here is reading generously, where you add assumptions, you soften language, you let words like probably sneak in. But inference questions demand discipline. If the text does not require it to be true, it doesn't count. And the bonus here is that this skill carries directly into reading comp. So if you can stay literal and restrained, that's going to improve in both LR and RC, logical reasoning and reading comp, at the same time. Now, flaw questions are one of my favorites because they are incredibly predictable. The test makers reuse the same flawed reasoning over and over again, like correlation versus causation, confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, or restating the premise as the conclusion. Now, if you can ID the flaw before you look at the answer choices and you can put it in your own words, the question changes completely, because you're no longer just searching for an answer. All you've got to do is match your prephrase, and that's total control. Now, the LSAT in its modern format has been around since June of 1991. That is, 35 years now. And during that time, the LSAT makers have not invented endless new reasoning styles. There are a limited number of argument structures, a limited number of reasoning errors, and a limited number of wrong answer traps. Now, once you review enough official questions properly, you're going to start seeing the same ideas recycled with different wording, and that is not an accident. The LSAT is not trying to surprise you. It's testing whether you can stay disciplined when familiar ideas show up in unfamiliar clothing. Now, there are 59 official exams available in the current LSAT format. Good news is you don't have to do all of them. You could get by with just doing 10 of them, and that might be enough if you understood them all inside and out. But if you rush through too many tests without engaging in deep review, you're probably wasting your time. A better approach is to do fewer exams and review them in depth. If you did those 10 exams and you understood truly why every right answer is right and why every wrong answer is wrong, you would have seen pretty much everything the test makers can throw at you. Now, there is a built-in gap between when you take the LSAT and when you get your score back, approximately 2 to 3 weeks. And that's the time for you to finalize your personal statement, polish up your essays, clean up your resume, and remind your recommenders if they haven't already sent in those rec letters for you. Now, if you use that time well, when your score comes back, you can submit your applications immediately, sometimes the same day. Now, if you have a strong LSAT score plus a complete polished application, that's much more powerful than applying earlier with a weaker score. Bottom line, if you're taking the LSAT in April or June, you're in a great position because you have time, you have flexibility, and you have the entire summer, not just 2 to 3 weeks, to work on your applications. So I want you to stop panicking about dates and treat the LSAT like a process to give yourself control. And that control is going to give you higher scores, better outcomes, and real options and leverage when it comes to admissions decisions. And if you'd like my help getting the highest possible LSAT score, whether you're taking it in April, June, August, or beyond, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this, now or later. The link to book that free call with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. Now, I see a question from Joe.gif asking how to add 20 points in less than a week. I don't like to make outlandish promises. I'm not going to say that I can get you 20 points in less than a week. If you're 20 points below your goal score, I would strongly recommend giving yourself a bit more time to achieve your fullest potential. Instead of taking the LSAT in February, take it in April. Give yourself a solid 2 months. Give yourself till June, give yourself a solid 4 months. It's worth giving yourself the time to achieve your fullest potential and get that 20-point increase. Whatever it is, whether it's going from a 140 to a 160, a 150 to a 170, or a 160 to a 180. Why not, right? You can get there if you're willing to put in the time. I believe strongly that anybody can get any score if they give themselves sufficient time, because the LSAT is ultimately just a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, the patterns, and how they design the exam, you can avoid the tricks and traps. You can better understand those methods of reasoning. That's what's going to get your score up. So don't rush it for February if you're not close to your goal. If you need 20 more points, go for April. We can get you into a more intensive boot camp style program of ours. If you want to go for June, we can take it a bit more slow and steady. Either way, it's worth the delay. Even if you have to push things back a cycle and apply law school 1 year later, it's well worth giving yourself the additional time. The LSAT is the biggest factor in the law school admissions process. And so giving yourself more time to get a higher score is going to save you tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarship money. And it's also going to establish the entire trajectory of your legal career. So well worth giving yourself more time. I see the Batman Calzone is asking, is great username. Is 2 months enough time to study? It could be. Depends. I mean, are you totally brand new to the LSAT, or have you been studying already? 2 months is really the absolute minimum I would recommend to give yourself study time. Ideally, you're going to give yourself more like 4 to 6 months. But if you were studying for the LSAT full time or treating it like a significant part-time job, it Could be enough time, but we got to look at what's your current LSAT score, what's your goal LSAT score, and what's your time frame. The particulars and the details matter here, right? So if you can share more context, I can give you better advice, but more time is always better if you can swing it. Mr. Nice Guy's asking, how many times can you take the LSAT? So there are retake limits, but they're not as bad as they used to be. You can take it 5 times in 5 years. You can take it 7 times for life. If you get a 180, you can't take it again. Understandably so, because why would you need to, right? But most people are not going to run into the retake limits. I see Juice Chirk is asking, would it be better to start studying for the LSAT from sophomore or junior year? Well, I mean, if you want to go directly from undergrad to law school, yeah, you probably want to take it in sophomore or junior year so that you have time, that you're planning ahead, that you have backup test dates if you need them. Your scores are good for 5 years, though. So you could hypothetically take it in the summer, right before your senior year, then hit submit the day applications open in the fall of your senior year. Then you'd be applying the beginning of the cycle to start law school 1 year later. So you don't have to do it sophomore or junior year, but you can. So if you have a lighter semester, lighter course load, you have a free summer, that might be a good time to do it because your scores are good for 5 years. So whenever you have the time to carve out to achieve your fullest potential, that's the best time to do it. King County's asking, how can we raise our score if we start off getting all questions right, then suddenly the rest wrong? So I'm guessing that what you're referring to here is in logical reasoning where the questions are easier earlier in the section and harder later in the section. So in a way, like your issue is quite typical. It's normal to get hard questions right. It's normal to get easy questions right and get hard questions wrong. So when you're getting harder questions wrong, it's because they either have more difficult methods of reasoning, the arguments are more complex, and so you've got to engage in deeper review like anybody else. So focus more on practicing and drilling harder questions. Look into exactly which tricks and traps you're falling for using a technique like the Socratic review method framework that we used at LSAT Unplugged, which is basically just root cause analysis. So when you get a question wrong, we're asking why. Was it a complex argument or passage? Was it a confusingly worded question stem? Was it attempting wrong answer in the choices? Was it an unappealing right answer choice? If we can drill down to the root cause, we can nip it in the bud and you're not going to make the same mistake again. But you got to slow down, do fewer questions, and review those fewer questions in more depth. That's really the name of the game. So that's what I recommend that you focus on during your prep primarily. And of course, look for trends. If there's particular question types that are giving you trouble, certain topics or certain methods of reasoning, focus more on those. But don't just keep taking exam after exam after exam, because that's honestly a waste of time and it burns through valuable limited practice material. And so if you were a student in our program, and maybe you are for all I know, what you want to do is you want to engage in a more personalized study process. We craft for you a custom study plan targeting your weak areas, drilling them. We go over your weak areas in the coaching to make sure that you're engaging in the most efficient step-by-step process possible to use your limited study time as efficiently as possible. I see Kayla's asking, how do I get into your program? You can click the link in my bio. We have a link to our website there. You can also book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me, and we could walk through the particulars to craft a more personalized coaching program for you. So link in my bio, happy to talk it through with you. Batman's asking, should I go for a scholarship at a lower ranked law school or go to a higher ranked law school with less money? Well, it depends on what your goals are and how much debt you're willing to take on. What kind of legal career do you want to have? If you want to go into big law or you want to work as a clerk on the Supreme Court, maybe you want to go to a higher ranked law school like Harvard or Yale or Stanford or UChicago or NYU or Columbia and get less scholarship money. Or maybe you want to go to or if you want to work at a regional law firm open your own practice. Maybe you want to go to a lower ranked law school and get a full ride, pay zero in tuition. It's your call, depends on your career goals. Either way, though, the path forward to reach that goal is the same. If you can get a higher LSAT score above the medians of the law schools that you're targeting, ideally above the 75th percentile of that given law school, then you're more likely to get scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. And it's well worth going for the scholarships, in my view, in many cases, because in part due to the elimination of the Grad Plus loans, basically starting this fall, you're all lucky, right? I say that sarcastically. There's the federal government is eliminating the Grad Plus loans. There's going to be a cap on how much money you can borrow for graduate school. And so in order to meet the cost of attendance for a given school, you might have difficulty doing that solely through federal loans, which means either you get scholarship money to get discounts on tuition, or you have to take out private loans or take out from your savings to cover the difference. And the cap on federal loans is $50,000 per year, but the average cost of attendance for law school is $84,000 a year. So the question is, how do you make up that $34,000 shortfall? There's private loans, not desirable considering the interest on those. And savings, of course, not everybody has that. So if you can get more scholarship money for law school, that's going to make up the difference. In most cases, that's the best path forward, in my opinion. Not for everybody, of course, but in the majority of cases. Ryan's asking, do we offer classes or one-on-one coaching? So we have both, actually. And so in my view, the killer combination for the best possible LSAT increase is to have multiple types of support throughout the week. And so in our April LSAT bootcamp, for example, we offer you live coaching 7 days a week. The way it works is you get 3 private one-on-one sessions every single week that you can schedule whenever is best for you, any day of the week. Then you also get 4 semi-private small group sessions. Those are Monday through Thursday in the evenings. You also get our comprehensive on-demand course and a custom study plan as well. And so that way you're getting both one-on-one, and you're also getting small group sessions. The one-on-one's more personalized, of course, just you and your coach. But in the small group, you're getting the benefit of community, interaction with other students, multiple perspectives from different coaches as well. To me, that's the best way to study, is to get different types of support. Of course, some folks have their own preferences, so we like to personalize things, but that might be a good way to go, especially if you're taking the LSAT in April. Of course, the April bootcamp is suitable for you. If you're taking it in June or August or beyond, we can take it more of a slow and steady approach. And so if you want to talk through particulars, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me through the link in my bio, and we could talk through it more. And we offer programs at all different budgets for all different timeframes. We also offer financing if you want to do installments. And so you can, DJ, I see you're asking as well, you can book the call with me. We can talk through it. Nursing Tricks is asking, can you take the LSAT from home? Yes, you can. So you can take it either remotely from your own home, or you could take it in person at a prometric testing center. There are benefits to each one. You take it in person at a testing center. You don't have any remote proctor whose own internet might fall apart halfway through the test. You have a smoother proctoring experience, but you also have potential distractions from other test takers. When you take it from home, no other people around you in the same room at least, but you're relying on your own internet connection, your own device, and you have a remote proctor who might be shaky. So think through your own home environment, think through which option sounds better for you, and then give that one a shot. All else being equal, I like taking it in person. I think that's a better path forward because so many people have had issues with remote proctoring. Might be a safer course of action. And Ryan, no, it's not too late for the April LSAT Bootcamp. We have folks joining today. We have folks joining this week. And with 2 months or roughly 9-10 weeks, plenty of time to improve significantly with a more intensive program like that. K Unphased is asking, for mid-ranked law schools, do you think a higher LSAT score would make up for a lacking resume? Honestly, a higher LSAT score can make up for a lacking resume for any type of law school. I mean, the LSAT score is the biggest factor in the law school admissions process. So it makes up for a lot of things. The LSAT is the #1 factor. Then there's your GPA. Then there's your personal statement, optional essays, addenda, resume, letters of rec. as distant third soft factors, but LSAT number 1, GPA number 2. And so law schools don't really care about your resume the same way that undergrad admissions does, because law schools are much more focused on the US News rankings. So that makes the process more numbers driven. What happens is they take your LSAT score and your GPA, they combine them together in a formula called the Law School Admissions Index. And the LSAT scores weighed more heavily than the GPA in that formula for virtually every single law school. The soft factors like the resume or the essays, they'll look at those. They're nice for context. But ultimately, because they're not quantitative factors, they're not quantifiable, they're not considered in the same concrete way. They can give context, of course, but the numbers matter most. In other words, if your LSAT and GPA are both below median, softs like resume are typically not going to push you over the edge. If you're borderline, they might help. But if you're below on both, probably not going to make the difference. Mr. Nice Guy is asking, tell me why lawyers generally get one state law license instead of multiple state law licenses. I'm going to guess on this one that it typically comes down to passing the bar exams in different states. If there's any attorneys on the call who could speak to this, feel free to chime in. But you have the uniform bar exam, which would admit you to practice law in multiple states, several different states. But then there are states like New York and California that have their own state bar exam. And there are particulars unique to that state that you'd have to study up on. And so because it's more work to study for more state bars, lawyers typically wouldn't study for that state's bar unless they need to for a business reason, meaning they want to be able to practice law in that state. Tell me if that makes sense, if I'm on the right track. I'm kind of just speculating here, but that's what seems to make sense to me, at least. By the way, though, for admissions, a given law school will typically prepare you to practice law in that particular state. And so if you are in New York and you want to practice law in New York, going to law school outside New York might not fully prepare you for the New York State Bar exam. And so you might want to go to law school in New York to prepare you for the New York State Bar. Now, if you want to practice in multiple states and you get a better law school admissions offer outside New York, maybe you just go to law school outside New York, then study about the New York bar later to pass that state's bar also. It's not an insurmountable obstacle to study for another state's bar, but people don't typically do it unless they have a particular reason to do so. I see King County and Abdel and CMAL are all asking different versions of the same question, or at least Abdel and CMAL are. How many questions do you have to get right to get a particular score? So there's what's called a raw score conversion chart, where you take the number of questions that you get right on a given LSAT prep test, which is a practice test, and then LSAC converts that number of questions correct into a scaled score on that spectrum of 120 to 180. So there are approximately 77 scored questions on any given LSAT practice test. And so if you got, say, 70 out of 77 questions correct, that might translate into a 170 LSAT score, hypothetically. On a different exam, you might be able to get only 68 questions correct to get a 170 LSAT score. And they vary for all the different practice tests. The practice tests are numbered 101 to 159. And so if you just Google LSAT prep test raw score conversion charts, you'll be able to see the conversion of raw score, meaning number of questions correct, into scaled score, meaning score out of 180 for any given practice exam. And by the way, of course, if you're using the old LSAT format exams that have logic games on them, which are obsolete as of over a year and a half ago, you're going to get a very skewed result because you're not doing logic games anymore, right? So those prep tests are not valid for giving you a proper indication of your potential out of 180. So any exams that are numbered 1 to 94 are old format. Don't use those. Instead, use 101 to 159 for the new format, and those are available in LSAC's Law Hub platform. For those who aren't familiar, you get 4 LSAT practice tests for free on there with your free lsac.org account. Then you get the other 55 numbered exams with your Law Hub Advantage subscription for $120 per year, well worth the investment. And don't use books on Amazon, don't use unofficial third-party sites, don't use PDFs because they're not properly preparing you for the actual LSAT test day experience. One of the reasons that students drop from their practice test to their actual is because they did not properly simulate test day conditions. And so you want to make sure that you're simulating every factor down to the software, given the look and feel of and the functionalities of the highlighting, the underlining, the raw score conversions, all of that good stuff. Now I see that David's asking, if I had a jump in practice tests from 142 to 156 in a month, and I still have 4 months till the test, how can I keep progressing? Well, what are your weak areas? I mean, a 14-point increase is great, so congrats on that. Let's get you another 14 points. Let's get you to 170. Of course, it's easier to make gains the lower you are, so you have to fight harder for every additional point as you go up, but still plenty of time, plenty of room to improve. The question is, where are you weak? Are there certain question types, certain methods of reasoning? Do you need to work more on pacing, more on endurance? Lots of different ways you might get to the same end goal, but what's the fastest, most efficient path there? That's what we want to look at, right? So if you want to talk through particulars, feel free to book the free tutoring lesson with me, unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is in my bio on TikTok and Instagram. Link is below the video on YouTube. Happy to meet with you personally, help you talk through what your personal study plan should look like. But it's going to be some combination of drilling weak areas, working on accuracy, looking for trends in certain question types that give you more trouble, certain methods of reasoning. Maybe it's going to be working more on your pacing, doing individual timed sections, or focusing more on endurance, doing full-length practice tests. So the answer might involve any one of those things or all of those things. The question is, what have you neglected so far? What's the untapped potential? Usually folks either take too many practice tests and not do enough foundational work, or they spend too much time drilling questions by type and not enough time or endurance work. And so think about what you have left out and what you might want to include going forward, just for some ideas. By endurance, I mean focusing on your stamina, because test day is going to be doing 4 timed sections with only a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3. And so with standard timing, you're doing 2 35-minute sections with no break, then a 10-minute break, then 2 more sections back to back, and that's your test. So that runs roughly 2.5 hours. It's a pretty good amount of time. And so folks often fatigue by section 4 and their performance tanks just because it's section 4. And so the antidote to that is to do more practice tests to build up your endurance, to build up your stamina, so that test day itself will feel like just another run through and you've done it all before. And so if you're taking the LSAT in April, they might be doing 1 exam per week for the next 10 weeks. If you're taking it in June, they might be doing 1 test every other week for the next 4 months. Or maybe you do 1 exam a week anyway and get 20 exams under your belt. To some extent, the more the better, up to a point, of course. You also want to allow enough time for sufficient in-depth review of those practice tests. I see Andaloops asking, my practice test book still has logic games still? Yeah, so your book is outdated. I would toss it aside. The logical reasoning and reading comp sections could still be relevant, of course, but the exams evolved over time. And so you don't want to study an outdated book. That could lead you down the wrong path. I mean, there have been some subtle changes to logical reasoning since they removed logic games, more emphasis on formal logic, conditional statements, chaining conditional chains together, more focus on numbers and percentages. A book that still includes logic games is not going to give those the necessary emphasis. There's also a recent change to reading comprehension just last month, where they removed the dual or comparative passages for some test takers without warning, and your book is not going to talk about that either. And so I typically recommend studying for the LSAT online using courses and classes because they're more up to date with the most recent LSAT changes. Catherine, I see Catherine's asking, how representative would you say are practice tests 155 to 159 and difficult to compare to the recent LSATs? I'd say fairly indicative of the difficulty overall. Anything in the 150s is pretty good to look at, but I wouldn't focus on the oldest exams from, say, 101 to 120 if that meant you were never going to get to the newer one. So any test is fair game. Any test is valid study material, but the newer exams are going to be a better indication of the modern evolution of the LSAT. So I'd focus on the 150s. I see Garrett's asking, what extracurriculars should I do in college before I apply to law school? I'm not necessarily sure that any extra, it's not worth focusing on extracurriculars in college for law school admissions because it's mostly LSAT and GPA driven. If you want to do something to do it, sure, if you would enjoy it, but don't do anything in particular just because you think it'll look good for law school. Not a good way to spend your time in general, and law schools won't really care enough to make it worth your devoting the time there. If anything, unless you've already secured your LSAT score, don't do the ECs or the clubs or anything like that, and just focus more on LSAT prep. In other words, I'd rather that you devote those 3 to 5 hours a week on your LSAT studying than on some club because you think it'll look good. A few more points on your LSAT's worth way more than another line on your resume. And you also want to maintain your GPA in college as well, right? So don't do anything that'll tank your GPA, your LSAT score, or both. I see Baby's asking, what does a typical LSAT question look like? Good news is you can see that for yourself for free. On LSAC's Law Hub platform, they give you 4 practice tests available for free. You can create a free account just with your email, no credit card required. That'll show you roughly 400 practice questions that you could study from. I can't display them here for copyright reasons, unfortunately, don't want to get shut down, so I can't show them publicly online, but on your lsac.org account, you'll be able to see those there. I see user 2932 is asking, how long is this score good for? Your LSAT score is valid for 5 years on your official LSAT score report. And so hypothetically, you could take the LSAT as a sophomore or as a junior, and then just hold on to it for a couple years, apply as a senior or even after a gap year or 2, and your score would still count. So take the LSAT whenever you're ready, whenever you feel like you're at or above your goal. And for folks, if you're finding this live helpful, I do this every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find it helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support, spreading the word. And if you're looking for more personal guidance, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free LSAT lesson with me over Zoom video, private one-on-one, is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.